It's not just religion. We've forgotten how powerful anyone who believes in anything can be. Because what in the West do we believe in anymore? Nothing. We believe in appeasement. We believe in bowing down. We believe in not telling the truth. We believe in fear. We believe in conformity. We believe in nothing. And that's why we can't stand. We fundamentally compromised our greatest values long before the immigrant crisis, long before the migrant crisis. And the reason why the migrant crisis is happening is because we compromised and destroyed our basic values generations ago. The welfare state should never have been allowed to stand. It should never have been allowed to rise. Private charity, community charity, religious charity, Christian charity, neighborhood charity, family charity, that should have been the barrier between the unlucky poor and their poverty. But the idea that we're going to assign the government the power to move trillions of dollars around from one end of the economy to the other, and it's not going to be used to buy votes, and it's not going to be used to excuse people from their own bad decisions, and it's not going to cause the disintegration of the traditional family system to the point where, you know, you're making hula hoops out of two feminists and banging them 6 wives from Sunday on a seamy bed. So the wages of sin is death. This is not a migrant crisis. It's not a migrant crisis. It's an immorality crisis. It's a self-betrayal crisis. The migrant crisis and the associating demographic and cultural challenges does not result from a failure of enforcing borders. It does not result from a failure of allowing too much immigration. It results from the welfare state. If I spill a whole bunch of honey on the ground, it's the honey that brings the bears, not the bears' fault. And so there is a great opportunity in the West to examine the roots of this crisis and say, where did we go so wrong that we have ended up in this situation? Now, the great temptation, and I understand it, and I may even accept it in the short run, the great temptation is, okay, close the borders. Close the borders. Sure, that buys us perhaps a little time, perhaps 10 years, perhaps. But what do we do in those 10 years? Do we just sit there and say, whew, we've solved the problem, now let's get back to spinning our way around various vaginas? No. No. You buy a little time, and what do? You figure out what went wrong at the base of things to the point where the entire history of the civilization may be threatened. And it's not immigration. Immigration is a symptom. The problem is the violation of property rights, the violation of personhood, the violation of integrity that allowed us to slither down the slippery, slidey pathway towards socialism that starts with the welfare state. Just imagine, I was just talking about this today. Just imagine. Let me take you back on a journey. I sent this book proposal out decades ago. I was 25, I think I was. So it's a quarter century ago. I sent this book proposal around saying, we need to deal with the welfare state. I sent it to publishers, and of course nobody was interested. Nobody cared. It didn't matter. I mean, it was crazy. And my friends were like, oh, it's mad. Who cares? It just helps some people. You want them to starve in the streets. Right. Now imagine in some alternate universe, 25 years ago, let's say that some orderly transition away from the welfare state towards private charity had been organized. Well, the reversal of the decay of the family would have occurred, right? That would have reversed. The decay of the family and the restitution of the family to its stable center of society would have occurred. The national deficits, it's the welfare state. Now, in America, it's somewhat also the military-industrial complex. But for most of the West, the debt and the deficit is the welfare state. And therefore, we would have paid off most of the national debt. Families would be stronger, charity would be stronger, more people would be actually helped rather than locked into these horrible migrant-attracting dungeons of permanent underclasses within society. Imagine, where would the migrants go if there was no welfare state? They would not come to Europe. They would not be coming to Europe. If there was no welfare state, you would not have all of these dysfunctional people who've made terrible decisions because there's a welfare state and are now surviving in that welfare state as a result of those bad decisions and enabling themselves to make more of those bad decisions. You wouldn't have created this giant, massive horde of people desperate to vote for more and more and more and more and more government all the time. You would have a society that respected property rights. You would have a moral society. You know, people say, well, why has Europe lost pride in its history? Because Europe sucks and has for generations. Europe is like a dead body washed up on the shore of history. And everyone says, well, why isn't he putting on any sunscreen? Because he's dead. Europe betrayed all of the precious liberties carved out of the hide of humanity and the carrion-feasted body of history. Europe betrayed those values generations ago by creating this syrupy, trapping the poor like prehistoric flies in amber welfare state. The massive, forced, immoral, evil violation of property rights that is undermining and destroying society. It's not the politicians. It's not the politicians. It's the voters. And the voters have been bribed. And the voters have become sentimental. And the voters have been backed into a corner where it's the welfare state or general starvation. They believe and have accepted this false dichotomy. You know, Ingrid Carlqvist was on this show. And I like Ingrid a lot. She was talking about how great Sweden was in the 70s. You could do anything. Everything was wonderful. Everything was great. Sure. Of course it was. Fucking boomers. Of course it was. Because if you borrow like crazy, you don't have to work. But then what happens is your kids end up inheriting the debt. Europe betrayed itself generations ago. This is the outcome of the self-betrayal of Europe. And Europe had the example of the late Roman Empire. Bread and circuses, entertainment provided by the state, and welfare. And multiculturalism. But multiculturalism has a lot to do with the welfare state. Why did you need a welfare state before you had multiculturalism? Because multiculturalism is financially not effective, not efficient. So once you have the welfare state, you can pay people to come in and you can pay people to pretend that they can live peacefully side by side when all of the data and all the evidence shows that it decays social trust and all the stuff I've talked about a million times before. Everyone surrendered their conscience to the state and said, you take the money of our children and you take care of the poor. I don't want to get involved. It's messy. They're smelly. Sometimes they have bad breath. They have halitosis. I don't know what they eat, where they sleep, what happens. I don't want to get involved. Let the state take care of it. I don't feel like getting up early and go to church. I don't feel like getting to know my neighbors. I'm going to sit home with my TV dinner, stuff my face, get fat, and watch the boob tube till my eyes dribble down my cheeks. And this laziness, this deference, of course, to what women want. Women will choose, in general, security over liberty. And nobody pushed back. Oh, but we got to please the ladies. Right. Yeah, because they're really going to be pleased at the future of Europe. I'm sure of that. So it just frustrates me. If people had listened to Ayn Rand regarding the welfare state, or to Milton Friedman, if people had listened, if people had accepted the arguments, which were very clear and very well validated, morally, economically, empirically, if people had listened in the past, the welfare state would not have come into being as a fundamental violation of every precept, of every principle, of every goal that the West and all moral societies had bended themselves towards, which is not just a man's home is his castle, but a man's wallet is his castle. Keep your robot statist hands out of my goddamn wallet. Let me help people as I see fit. Because I have a private incentive for people to get better when my money is spent. All you assholes do is wallpaper people's houses, their tin shacks, their mobile homes with money to buy their votes and trap them in dependence upon these mechanical, slowly dying, blood-soaked state robot udders of fiat currency. So Europe betrayed itself generations ago. Europe decided to go for the cheap and easy out. Europe decided to go for the redistribution to satisfy the ladies' welfare state. Sweden, 800 years. 800 years, no welfare state. A few years after women get the vote, welfare state. Why didn't people push back? Why didn't they stand up and say, ladies, you're kind of new to this. Let me explain to you how it works. Let me explain to you why we don't want this. And people didn't push back. They didn't fight back. And
why didn't they know?
I don't know. I wasn't there. I can only tell you about what I've known, which is that I've been talking about the evils of the welfare state for 34 years. 34 years. And everyone says, Steph, you're crazy. You're just a nasty guy. You just want people to suffer. He's like, yeah, how are they going to do over the next little while, everyone? Oh, you see, you want the heroin addict to get less heroin and eventually no heroin? You just want him to suffer? Well, what are the alternatives? We're seeing what the alternatives are. That if you create this giant prize of welfare, you know, in Sweden, a migrant family on welfare gets over $3,200 US a month. How much do you think they're getting in the Middle East? You can't blame them. Of course not. I mean, if I could go someplace and I could get 10 times the income for not working.
I mean, can't you completely not blame people for taking money for free?
But it's not free.
Well, it's free for them. That's the point.
No, I'm not talking about the migrants. I'm talking about the Europeans.
Oh, okay.
Everybody knew it was a sleazy deal with a syrupy devil to give the government this kind of power. Everyone surrendered their money to the government, their health to the government, their incomes to the government, their children to the government. Yeah, let's give kids to the state to raise them, because Lord knows the state has been just such a wonderful entity all throughout European history and around the world. Hey, you remember that government that started the First World War, which killed 10 million people and 20 million people more when the Spanish flu hit at the end of 30 million people? All these European governments started all these wars that killed 30 million people. Hey, how about the Second World War? Ooh, we got an extra 40 million people. How about 100 million people dead through communism? Oh, you could go on. And it's like, hey, these homicidal maniacs at the top of the pyramids of state power, these people who wield political power like Smog wields his fiery breath, how about we give our children to these people to raise? Wouldn't that be great? How about these people who care so much about humanity that they've poured 250 million people into the wood chipper of disassembling state power in just 100 years. Let's give them the power to help the poor. Let's give them all the healthcare in the world. Let's give them all the charity in the world. Let's give everyone everything who's an asshole. Why? 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 For God's sakes. I can understand in the late 19th century, when Western Europe had been largely war-free for 70 or 80 years, and it's the fall of Napoleon in 1815. Okay, but dear God alive, in the 1930s, and the 1950s and the 1960s, after 2 world wars, yeah, let's give the government more power, because it only got fucking half of Europe killed in the span of half a century. Sure, let's give them the kids, let's give them everything, because they've just proven themselves to be so wonderful and so benevolent and so helpful and so great. Send it all over. Send them the kids. Send them the money. Give them all the power to create money. Give them all the power to regulate everything. Give them all the power to make a third of the population dependent on stupid bullshit pieces of paper government licenses so that they can draw breath and make money. Let's give the government the power to redraw all the lines in the family. Let's give them the power to raise the children. You want to know why Sweden is dying? Because like 99.9% of Swedish children grew up in daycare and bonded with the state. You think they have the power, the capacity, in any way, shape, or form, to push back against and resist the state? The state is their parent. They can't restrain the state because the state is literally their giant maternal tit. And they are as strong with the state as a baby is with its mother. You handed your children, Swedish moms, gotta face it, you handed your children over to the state to be raised. You took the 40 pieces of silver. You betrayed the Jesus of your principles. And now you claim to be shocked that all you have raised is hell on earth.